Yesterday was a challenging day for everyone in our athletic department, in our business advancement unit that some of you are familiar with, that we also oversee. Every person in those units were impacted in some form or fashion, via furlough or salary reduction opportunity, so with the exception of our sports psychologists who we felt were important to keep online at all times for our student athletes. You have the information in the release relative to the numbers and the furlough days and things of that nature. Our primary objective was to make sure that what we did in our personnel management space was to try and protect the needs of our student athletes. That's why our athletic trainers and strength and conditioning coaches are in the 5-day furlough category. And keep in mind that the furloughs are a window of time between October and June 30th of next year. So our strength and conditioning coaches and athletic trainers should be able to provide the ongoing service for our student athletes. It's particularly important for this fall. We have no sports at this time. There's no one competing. So they're working out, they're training, they're being tested, all those type of things. And so that part of our personnel team is critical to the well-being of our student athletes. And so we went with the 5-day protocols there. Then you see the rest as in the release. The contracted employees are voluntary opt-in option. It's equivalent to a 10-day furlough. They will receive today, and I will receive today, a document from HR asking for a formal opt-in. I anticipate that all of our contracted employees will opt in at some point, but that'll be their decision. It's certainly optional because they are contracted. And I anticipate they all will. Ryan Day and Chris Holman and I have already had conversations. I know they will opt in, but they still have to formally do it through the HR process that's been defined by the institution. Some of you have gone through this, so you know how challenging it is. And you know how much we care about our families, so it was hard all across the board. 25 people's lives were significantly altered through the reduction in force. And it was obviously a challenging day for a lot of our unit managers working with HR who actually had to go through the process of informing those individuals. We would do our best to help them as they move through rethinking their careers and trying to help our best to try and help them get placed based upon what they want to do. People in the 60-day furlough category, fortunately within the institution, great partnerships, they've all been redeployed and they'll have other jobs at the institution, and their salaries and benefits are made whole. Because of the new jobs that they'll be in until December 31st. If we feel a need to bring them back because of some work in our space that evolves, be it basketball or men's ice hockey or whatever, when we have clarity on what those sports look like relative to activity, then we may be able to bring a few people back from those redeployments. So that's the primary message today. Our budget is uncertain. You have the numbers, but I'm gonna just be quite frank with all of you. They mean nothing at this point in time relative to accuracy. They're estimates. Our media rights with football are still being determined with our television partners, so there's no recognition of that at this point in time. Regardless of what all the experts say nationally and relative to their assumptions. But our conference office with our television committee are working closely with our television partner to ascertain what the value of our current schedule is. And of course, as you guys have all witnessed, there's been a lot of games postponed. So hopefully we can play all the way through. But if we don't, then that number changes again. We don't have clarity on basketball. We made some assumptions there. There's still a lot of conversation about the schedule, what it would look like. And we have a subcommittee of the Big Ten, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we'll have some clarity on what that schedule looks like for men's and women's basketball and men's ice hockey that have a chance to start up in November. So those numbers are guesstimates. Our sponsorship numbers are guesstimates. So one of the reasons that we waited so long to get to this point was football, because without understanding our football fate, everything that we're doing is uncertain. So we'll have more clarity as we move down the path and have our media rights numbers and we have our basketball locked down, and then our numbers will be much more accurate as we move forward. We of course know significant impact that we're going to take, which is why we made the personnel decisions that we made and all the other operational cuts that are outlined in our release. But at the end of the day, the numbers are estimates. So I just wanted to share that and then just open it up to questions, Jerry.
Yep, thank you very much, Gene. We will open up with Dan Hope from 11 Warriors with Austin Ward on deck. Dan?
Hey, Gene, I know that you were on the television subcommittee for the Big Ten. So do you have an idea of, what that might look like in terms of media rights revenue in comparison to what it would be in a normal year?
I have no clue. And actually, Dan, I wasn't on the television committee. I don't know where that came from. So I guess Twitter, somebody said it, I guess, and you guys ran with it because everything on Twitter is right. But, the reality is I was not on the television committee, and I'm not. It's still going on. So, but I have no estimate. Obviously, we have 9 games as opposed to, the 12, and so the dates and times will be different. So I have no clue at this point in time. Our television committee, working with our commissioner, and is working through that process now.
How challenging is it to, make a budget like this, to make decisions like this when you just don't know what that big piece of a pie is going to look like?
Yeah, it's huge, Dan. I mean, we do know certain things. Obviously, we know our ticket sales hit is lost. So you have to try and mitigate that, which is why we've done what we've done. We anticipate, even if we have basketball games, I'm not sure how many we're going to have at home. We're hopeful that we can have in the double digits. But even with that, we know that our attendance will be 0 or significantly less, depending upon what's happening at that particular time with the virus. So it's hard. It's hard. You try and attack the big numbers, but you also know that at this point, which is another uncertainty, if we're able to play fall sports in the spring, what's that expenditure number going to be for us? We don't know if men's and women's soccer are going to be allowed to play conference games only or conference games plus non-conference. I mean, there's so many moving parts to your point, Dan. All we know is the big hits around ticket sales have to be dealt with. We also know that some of our sponsorship dollars and our annual giving dollars will be down. So we have to address that. But it is difficult when you don't have clarity on a number of different things. We know we won't have concert revenue. We know that. So there's just a number of different things like that. We knew we won't have concessions revenue. We won't have parking revenue. So those things we know, but it's still, to your point, Dan, it's a little difficult. And I'm hopeful once we get some clarity on the media rights and some clarity on basketball schedules, we'll be better served with our numbers.
Thanks, Gene.
Next up, Austin Ward, Letterman Row with Haley Colombo on deck. Austin?
Hey, Gene, I think all of us understand how proud Ohio State is to sponsor 36 sports. How close was that number to dropping in this process?
Yeah, we not at this point in time, Austin. Of course, everything is available option as we move into the future, but right now that's not a major conversation.
I guess, part of it is you look at that number, like, are there sports, like, why is there a need? Why is Ohio State proud to keep it at 36, I guess? Like, why is that such a point of pride for this athletic department to keep that support at that level?
Well, if all of us care about our student athlete opportunities. I mean, and when you think about the young people in all those sports and the experiences derived through those sports, it's phenomenal. We all love football. We focus on football. That's what we do. But when you think about the other sports and you see them winning national championships, or you see them winning conference championships, and you see them performing at the top end academically, and you see them graduating and staying in Central Ohio and staying in Columbus and becoming contributors to our environment, there's lessons learned in those sports that are equivalent to football. They are. So I can just give you my speech, but I won't. I know you all know it, but at the end of the day, those student athletes derive the same benefits. And so, and actually, for some of the sports, if you did the math, keep in mind, most of those sports are equivalency sports. So super majority of those student athletes are paying their own way. So what we have done with a number of them sports is reduce the expenditures in their operations. And the coaches have been great about that. But when you start to actually do the math on your scholarship count, many of them are paying their own way. And so it's an interesting math issue, but at this point in time, that's not on the table.
Thanks, Gene.
Next up, Haley Colombo with Business First and Nathan Baird on deck. Haley?
Hey, thanks. So how do you plan to cover so I know media rights will come in at some point, so it won't be quite $107 million, but do you have to cover that deficit in some way? Do you cover it with fund balances? Will Ohio State give some money to cover the the $180 million in expenses that you do have? Is there loans that you're taking out? What is your plan for that?
Well, Kaylee, that's a great question. And frankly, your second to your last comment, I wish you would promote that so the institution will cover our deficit, but that's not going to happen. We've been self-supporting and we'll continue to be self-supporting. So we've been working with our chief financial officer, our CFO office, and his staff, and we're developing a long-term debt recovery plan. So as soon as we have better clarity on our numbers, we'll be able to sit with him and his staff and develop a strategy whereby we pay back that loan over time. And so every year moving forward, looking to FY 22, for example, we'll have a line item in our budget that will be debt recovery based upon the number of years and if we have to pay interest or not. So to your other part of your question, it might be an internal loan. And of course, I'm going to battle for it not to be interest-bearing loan. It should be interest-free. So we're going to do our best to develop a long-range plan. So we'll maintain our self-supporting status because we'll pay back our debt. To your question, when I was at Eastern Michigan, when we had those type of debts, the institutions covered those debts. And that's what happens across the country at a lot of schools. But there's somewhere north of 20 that are self-sustaining, and we're in that category, and so that's how it'll work for us. Great question, Gabe.
Just to clarify, so it could be, though, that it could be an internal loan as opposed to a private loan, and an internal loan obviously would come from Ohio State and would not have interest.
It will be an internal loan, and it could have interest.
Okay.
That would be something I have to negotiate with our CFO in that office.
Okay, thanks.
Next up, Nathan Baird with Cleveland.com and Bill Rabinowitz on deck. Nathan?
Hey, Gene, can you further explain why for the 47 employees, yourself and the highest paid coaches, I assume, why are those contractually, why do they have to be voluntary? Why can't those be mandatory salary reductions? And then further, the most exorbitant salaries or the highest salaries, why are those not reduced further in order to avoid the layoffs and the salary reductions for lower paid employees, the furloughs and things like that?
Yeah, so the contract is a contract. So you have to abide by the contractual obligation that the institution has with that individual. So, you can't mandate someone or any entity that you have a contractual relationship with. You can't mandate that. You can't. You have to. You have to abide by the contractual agreement that you enter into with that entity or that individual. So that's just legally the responsibility. We wanted everyone in the department to be the same. And obviously the 5% is on a bigger number, so it's a big number. But at the end of the day, we wanted everyone to be treated the same. And we felt comfortable with that, and so does our team.
Will this change the way that you maybe approach those sorts of contracts in future? Just, obviously this is kind of a once in a lifetime situation, but is it making you rethink the way you approach that kind of contractual language, or just maybe other things within the athletic department that were previously like fixed costs? Do you approach them differently in the future?
Nathan, that is a great question. You might get hired on our staff. So everything we do now is being rethought. None of us, you or anyone, have experienced what we've experienced in the pandemic. None of us. And so it's caused you to think differently about a whole lot of things. And so we're going through that process right now. That is, yes, to answer your question specifically, yes. But I want to share that it's broader than that. The things that we've learned that we have to deal with relative to the pandemic, it's changing everything. I never thought that I would actually have to articulate in a game contract information around a pandemic. I have to be more clear than force majeure. So you're exactly right. That's a great question, Nathan. I appreciate it. But there's so many different things I'd love to just go off on all those things, but to your question, yes.
Next up, Bill Rabinowitz with the Columbus Dispatch with Doug Lesmerises on deck. Bill?
Yes, Gene, the 25 employees who are going to lose their jobs, I'm guessing you don't want to identify who they are, but is there a category that most of them fit in?
No, not really, Bill. These were based upon positions. So I guess I should take you back. We've been doing this reduction in force started last year, actually. So we knew that over time we needed to reduce our headcount. So we've been not filling positions since January, prior to the advent of COVID at its major place. So we started that process. So we've been looking at position needs. What positions could we redeploy to do these responsibilities? What this has done is expedited it. And so there's not a specific category, Bill, to your question. It's all over the board. And this is athletics and business advancement. I have to remind everyone that we oversee Nationwide Arena, Drake Union, Blackwell Hotel, trademark licensing. And so we have a unit called business advancement, and that unit is integrated functionally with the athletic department. So it's not just, so it's job function, Bill.
Okay, and I know you don't know what the TV revenue is going to be for football, but obviously it's going to be a substantial amount, you hope. How much worse would it have been if you didn't have a football season and at least have that kind of revenue?
So one of the reasons that we waited was exactly what you just said. Our furlough and reduction in force plan was significantly more challenging prior to the announcement that football would come back. And so we decided that we had a chance for it to be available in the fall. So we held out and we reduced the impact significantly. It's still major impact, but it's not as bad as it would have been if football didn't come back in the fall.
And by the way, it was the Big Ten who had you on that subcommittee.
Oh, did they? I'm not on that subcommittee. I don't know how they did that. If I am on that subcommittee, they never invited me to a meeting. Let's be clear.
May I explain some things, Gene?
Yeah, I'll just leave it alone. I'll just leave it alone.
Next up, Doug Lesmerises with Cleveland.com and Dennis Dodd on deck. Doug?
Gene, in the release, it says some of the savings, you guys saved $3 million in the non-conference game guarantees. So did you get out of the contracts with Buffalo and Bowling Green, or did you have to pay some of that?
Yeah, we will end up, that will come out of our media money, Doug. We're still working with the conference office on that. And then also we're still negotiating with those teams. So what our strategy is, whatever our media rights number is from our television partners, if we can't negotiate something with those teams, then we'll take that out of the media rights money from the conference office, and the conference office will pay that.
If you feel like you can't negotiate something with these MAC teams, will you be mad at the MAC? Will this affect the Big Ten MAC relationship going forward?
No, God, no. No. Guys, remember I came from the MAC. I feel for them. I really do. I feel for them. And the impact that on all the MAC schools that the pandemic has had is significantly worse than it has been for the Big Ten or any Power 5 conference. And so I think the last number I saw was somewhere around 41% of the Mid-American Conference schools' revenue comes from their institutional general funds. And that might be higher because I think that number was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And just, you guys know the MAC. I love the MAC and everything that they're about. And I feel for all those ADs in those institutions.
And last thing for me, Gene. So I'm just trying to come at this. Nathan asked you about the football, like Ryan and Chris and those contracts. And I understand a contract is different. But I'll be honest, just 5% to me doesn't seem like enough. In a world where Ryan's on schedule to make $5.4 million, it feels like to me the reason that the football coach can make $5.4 million is because football brings in a lot of money, right? I mean, you bring in ticket revenue, you bring in media rights. It's not that football is inherently better than any other sport. It's that it makes more money, which allows the football coach to make more money. So if football is making substantially less money, it feels like to me the head football coach should have a greater reduction than 5%. And I understand the contract thing, but I'm a little surprised that you weren't able to reach an agreement where Ryan and maybe Chris would come down more than that. Is my thinking wrong on that? Isn't the reason he's paid that because you make so much on football?
No, your opinion's not wrong on that, Doug. I mean, everybody's have their right to opinion. You, me, everybody else. So I respect your opinion. We just disagree.
So, but you're comfortable with the 5% if that's where Ryan and Chris?
100%. 100%.
Okay.
Next up, and folks, we're
Did everybody
on
freeze?
time, and we still have a number of organizations I want to be able to call on. If we could keep our questions limited.
Everybody's
to
freezing. What's happening here?
We still see you and hear you, Gene.
Okay.
Okay. Yep.
All right. That's good. That's better.
Next up, Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports Online with Steve Berkowitz on deck. Dennis? And you're on mute, Dennis.
Okay, I got you. Gene, when was the last time, or if you ever had to take out a loan such as this?
We've never had to take out a loan. I was just turning off all my Wi-Fi so we don't freeze everywhere. But we never had to take out a loan, Dennis. Not at Ohio State like this. So what everybody understands, I think everybody knows how our capital debt works. Our capital debt is based upon internal loans. So when we built the Covelli, we had to go out, raise the money, and the pledges pay off that loan as the donors pay over time. And there's an interest on that. but otherwise not a operational loan.
You're one of the 20 or so schools that you mentioned that are self-sufficient. What does this entire thing portend for the schools that aren't in that top 20?
Well, you just mentioned the MAC. I mean, it's
Yeah.
challenging. I mean, it's when you think about all those schools and what they're going through and working with their institutions to try and maintain their sport programs and recover, it's challenging, and I feel for them. And we're all going through it. Every school that's in that self-sufficient category is either dipping into some reserve or they're building a long-term debt recovery plan like we are. Someone may have the capacity to go outside and do a private loan. Going back to Kaylee's question, if you're a private institution or you're a separate 501c3, you may have the capacity to do that. So there's a lot of different funding models to recover, but obviously the other schools are challenged.
Thanks.
Next up, Steve Berkowitz with USA Today and Clay Hall on deck. Steve?
Gene, the salary reduction that is outlined, the coaches having their compensation divided into different buckets, is that percentage reduction being taken against the total compensation or against only the base salary portion, or how is it being apportioned?
Great question, Steve. It's base. It's being taken off of the base.
It's being taken against the base only?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next up, Clay Hall, WSYX TV with Joey Kaufman on. Clay?
Gene, you didn't specify where the cuts came. Would you say most, I guess the bottom line is, did you cut any coaches in this 25 positions?
No.
Thank you.
Next up, Joey Kaufman with the Columbus Dispatch and Dan Perlman on deck. Joey?
Gene, just to clarify, as far as the loan goes, are you guys able to take out a loan from a lender not being the institution? And do you have a preference about taking a loan versus from the institution or like a outside lender?
No, I haven't explored that. It's a great question, but I really don't know because I haven't explored that because we're comfortable working with our CFO in the university.
And just as far as being self-sufficient, how important is that to you as a department? I assume as long as you've been here that the department's been self-sufficient, but is that something you guys are told it's important to maintain? Can you just speak to the importance of that?
Yeah, it's very important. We don't want to be a burden to the institution. We want to be an asset, and that's what we want to do. And there's a focus on making sure we maintain that status as an athletic department, which is why we're doing what we're doing. So it's very important to us.
Dan Perlman, NBC4 with Steve Hellwagon on deck. Dan? All right, Steve Hellwagon, 24/7 Sports with Rob Aller on deck. Steve?
Yeah, Gene, question I have, Ohio State's got an endowment of about $5 billion. And I know you have a new president coming in who may or may not be versed in all this, but you've been here 15 years. You're a senior vice president of the university. I don't know, I guess my question is, if that money's there for a rainy day, wouldn't this be considered that type of situation? I know the university as a whole is going to run a deficit as well as part of this, but wouldn't that money make perfect sense to be put in place for a situation like your department is in to be paid back over time?
Yeah, the endowment revenue is already allocated to other entities within the institution. So it's the revenue off of the endowment. The endowment itself, the principal, the corpus, you just can't go into the corpus without going back to the donors who helped created the endowment, because they identify what they wanted those dollars to go towards. We have endowments in athletics where people endow scholarships. You can't use that money except for their intended purpose. but the interest off of the endowments from the institution are allocated to different academic parts of the institution. So a decision will have to be made that we're no longer going to support whatever that academic entity is, but we're going to support athletics.
Yeah.
And that's would be different for the Ohio State University.
Yeah. I know the budget for the athletic department went to 100 million about 10 years ago, and within 10 or 12 years is now 200 million. Is there a thought about austerity going forward, that it was such a quick jump that perhaps there should be in place a line item for a rainy day fund to where you as a department, I say you figuratively, the department has 50 million or whatever they need to sustain themselves? I mean, there's an argument out there, you make enough money that there should be enough money set aside on an annual basis to weather a one-year storm like what you just saw.
Yeah, it's very difficult. That's a great question, Steve. So we were up, our reserves were up to around 24, 25 million at one point in time, and now it's down to like 17. And we paid off a lot of short-term loans when I first came here in 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's a lot of us forgot about some of those things that were built back in those days, the addition to the shot for the basketball arena and the softball facility and recovering the track in French Fieldhouse. I mean, a lot of people forgot about all those type of things. So you could have an athletic program that could build the reserves up and have those reserves sitting on the sidelines, to your point, waiting for a pandemic. But that's something that philosophically I just don't support. I just believe that the dollars generated should be pumped back to the athletes as best they can. And, we've been doing that. We oversee a significant amount of facilities, and you can't raise money to replace an elevator. You can't raise money to replace a transformer. You can't, there's curve cuts, and I can just go on and on that most people on this call would never think about, that are deferred expenditures that we have to deal with. So we, I guess, go forever. But the reality is, if you do those, if you just build up your reserves, then you're probably not going to be able to address the deferred maintenance issues in all the facilities that we have. Placing the roof on the Woody Hayes Athletic Facility was a $3 million hit. I can't call Clay Hall and say, hey, give me $3 million, I'll put your name on the roof. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So, I don't know. There's probably some schools that have the reserve that you're talking about, Steve, but it won't be many. And if they do, they're making some different decisions.
Yeah. Hey, last thing.
Hey, Steve, I got to move on. Steve,
what's basketball going to look like? That's all I was going to say. Starts November 25th. What does it look like?
5-on-5 with a ball and officials. I don't know, Steve. That's still being developed. We do have a basketball committee that's being chaired by Mike Robinski. Somebody check it out. See if I'm on that committee too. I need to find out.
If I could ask
Jerry,
everyone,
I promise.
Thank you. If I could ask everyone to go back on mute. We've got two more people we got to get to because we're running out of time. Next up, Rob Aller from the Columbus Dispatch with Tim May on deck. Rob?
Hey, Gene. You've said correctly that you're an athletic department, not a football department. That said, football funds pretty much everything with some basketball thrown in there. Kind of philosophically speaking, moving forward, maybe in the short term, maybe long term, are you going to have to start flying coach instead of first class, sort of in football, if that makes any sense?
That's great. That's a great question, Rob. We're anxiously waiting, for example, for our game times. We may go to a place day of game and, fly in, play and fly out. We may bus to East Lansing. So we don't know yet. Obviously everything's dependent upon game time, but there's certain things in the football space that we have already made some cuts in, but we will continue to look at it. And it goes back, I think, to Joey's question, somebody's question earlier, maybe it was Nathan's. We're going to just everything's going to be different moving out, moving forward. And so, yes, the answer is yes to your question.
Can you afford to do that with football, though? Don't you have
Sure.
to kind of keep up with the Bamas and the Clemsons and everything like that?
You have to keep up relative to recruiting. First and foremost, you never touch your coaches, your recruiting, all those type of things at the end of the day are critical. Now, are there some other things that we could do differently? Yes, Rob. We in normal times, the number of people that stay overnight in the hotel the night before a game, maybe we take that number down. So there's a lot of things, to your point, that we could look at, and will.
We'll wrap up this call with a question from Tim May from Letterman Row. Tim?
Yeah, a couple of three quickies. Gene, number one, are there two kinds of athletic departments right now? Those who have either made these cuts or will make these cuts?
Yes.
Number two, do you expect from a Big Ten standpoint for you guys to reap some type of, by meaning the Big Ten by playing, to reach some type of premium TV rights package from a financial standpoint? Or what are you just hearing from that standpoint of the fact that you guys will be delivering games, it appears?
I don't know, Tim. One of the things I don't want to do is negotiate in public with our partners. So I don't know that answer.
Yeah. And number three, how much from these cuts that you're making, how much do you expect to save short term headed forward with just the cuts that you've instituted today or you've announced today?
So I want to make sure I understood your question. You mean just for this year or more long term?
Yeah. Well, just for this year. I mean, how close will this get to satisfying the hole that you're in?
The personnel part was a $7 million hit, and the other cuts are outlined in the release.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Great.
Can I just clarify that piece of it? The 107 million, the cuts that were announced in the release, they don't close that 107 million gap.
No, that's exactly right, Kenny. You're great. You're doing the math. There you go.
Okay.
And I will tell you, soon as we have clarity on basketball, and as soon as we have clarity on the media rights, we'll have more details for you. Oh, and the other piece, I think by that time, parallel to that, we'll have clarity on what the spring sports schedules will looking like. So keep in mind, we have expenditures for men's and women's soccer, men's and women's volleyball, field hockey that we don't know yet. So we don't know how many games we're going to have to travel to or host at home. So I think within the next, few weeks or so, we'll have clarity on all those things, and numbers will be much more accurate around those things. So we could have I'll probably have you sit down with our finance people at that point in time, because we'll be a lot more accurate